Alright, in my last video I was noting how Jesus replied, if I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. And I think if I testify as to what is wrong here, the most clearly incorrect thing is here, where it says, meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and teaching. And then at the end, then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. My impression is that there is only one high priest, so what is wrong is, well, Jesus has spoken openly to the world, always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together, and said nothing in secret. Well, right now we have him speaking in the courtyard uh, with a locked gate, where the servant girl is keeping anyone from coming in. So this is sort of a secret area. Um, anyway, uh, he wasn't being questioned by the high priest. He was being questioned by Annas, and so we should have him there inside the house with the high priest Caiaphas, who is actually questioning them. And then I got a little confused at the end of the last video, but let's look at Matthew 26:64, where the high priest said to Jesus, I charge you under oath of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Whoops, adds. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And he says, you have said so, but I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore at his clothes and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do you need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And he says, he is worthy of death. And what do I think? Maybe not so much blasphemy, but it does sound a little bit like the crowing of a rooster. Of a person, crowing means make a sound expressing a feel of happiness or triumph, or say something in a tone of gloating satisfaction. It's a bluster, trumpet, show off, swagger, boast. So that is the last thing that Jesus says to Caiaphas. And here in John's Gospel, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He said, I am not. And one of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him, didn't I see you with him in the garden? Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. So here is Simon Peter, another disciple, the servant who says, didn't I see you, or the relative of Malchus, he says, didn't I see you out there? And he says, no, that wasn't me. And at that moment, I think it's Barabbas who says, you will see me sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on a cloud of heaven. And the other disciple, John, here, describes that as the crow of a rooster. So I think it makes sense to suggest that the other disciple there that is not being named could be John, or at least the author of John's Gospel, even if that author of John's Gospel isn't actually named John. Okay, then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against him?" So I'm kind of picturing this way. Um, Barabbas is already inside the palace. Uh, they were like, "Oh yeah, this guy has been leading an insurrection. He's a bad dude. We're gonna probably put him in prison and crucify him on later this afternoon." Meanwhile, Pilate is outside talking to Annas, Caiaphas, servants and officials, um, and asking, "What charges do you have against this guy?" And I say, "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." And Pilate says, "Take him yourself and judge him by your own law." And they say, "But we do not have the right, we have no right to execute anyone." This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Actually, let's back up for a second, because I don't think that Barabbas is here at this point. To see what really happened, we need to go to Luke chapter 23, where the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." So Pilate asks Jesus, and I think this is Jesus Barabbas, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he says, "You have said so." Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up trouble all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." On hearing this, Pilate asked the man if he was Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. So we have Barabbas going over to Herod before the next scene in John. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He plied him with questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. So Barabbas was dressed in an elegant robe, and sent back to Pilate, but not necessarily yet. I don't know whether he's there yet. We'll continue with John, because here Pilate comes out and says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" And they have really nothing to say. They don't say that anything about him uh, uh, encouraging people not to pay taxes or whatever. They just say, "If he were not a criminal, would we be handing him over to you?" Okay, so Pilate went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So here's Pilate, basically alone with Jesus, and he asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" Pilate's like, "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied, "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" And Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world." And I think this is actually, this isn't the main subject of the rest of the book, because he's over here getting tried by Herod and being dressed in a nice purple robe or whatever. It says, "You are a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me." And it's that is the paradox, because I don't know if it's a paradox, but if you listen to the teachings of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he says things like, don't practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. When you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets like hypocrites do. Um, Although those things could be revised a little bit now that it kind of becomes apparent that announcing your giving often results in other people giving to the same thing if they think you're cool. But people on the side of truth do believe in not in any unholy father, but prefer the Holy Father. They do want the kingdom of earth to be the kingdom of heaven to be on earth, which to in the eyes of truth would just mean making it constantly a better place. They do need to eat. People can't survive without their daily bread. And if people are on the side of truth, they are against uh, debt because uh, debt can be a situation where the rich profit from the poor. Lead us not into temptation. A temptation is any situation where a temporary gain or a temporary apparent gain will lead to your own suffering later. And deliver us from evil just means that you are not put into a place of suffering. Anyway, everyone on the side of truth listens to Jesus Bethlehem. To listen to Barabbas over here, who's got the nice, elegant robe, he is much harder to work out. Maybe there's truth in the stories of Barabbas that John tells, the son of the father, but it takes a lot of decoding, as I hope these videos have demonstrated. But what is truth? Retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. A question of what is truth is sort of the essence of what is in part some of the essence of what John's Gospel is about. How so many words of John's Gospel are devoted to being true in a certain way, but almost being deliberately misleading, even though if you understand their correct interpretation, they are true. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for the charge against him. I find no basis for the charge against him. But by this time Barabbas has returned in his nice robe, his beautiful robe. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews? And so the Jewish people say, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. In particular, he opposed the payment of taxes to Caesar. Bethlehem definitely didn't oppose the paying of taxes to Caesar, because it says in several of the Gospels that give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. I think this may be the only verse in the Bible that refers to, or in John's Gospel that refers to Barabbas. Let's make sure there's nothing fishy about the verses in Greek. John 18:39, it is, however, a custom with you that one I should release to you at the Passover, Wish you therefore I should release to you the King of the Jews. So there might be a little bit of miscommunication here, because look at this. Here's Jesus Barabbas, who went over to Herod, and they dressed him in purple robes. Pilate is standing to this man dressed in fine robes, and this man that is dressed uh, more casually, at least, and he is asking, which one should I release to you? Should I release to you the King of the Jews? So what are they seeing? They're seeing a man dressed in fine robes and another one that is dressed in rags, and they say, no, not that one. Give us Barabbas. So Pilate takes both men back inside, or maybe actually he lets this one go. Yeah, he lets this one go. Bye-bye, Barabbas. Thank you. Then he takes Jesus of Bethlehem, and Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns, put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe, and went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. So now Jesus of Bethlehem is being tormented in his own purple robe. Barabbas has gone out, and they're tormenting him, calling him King of the Jews. And Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. And when Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, Here is the man. But as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, Crucify, crucify. Okay, so he has dressed him up just to look like him. Okay, and at this point, they are once again saying, Crucify the guy in the robe. I don't know how well they can see, but they don't realize that this is a different person than this was. These people are a mob that just despise that robe. And Pilate answered, You take him and crucify him. I find no basis for a charge against him. And the Jewish leaders insisted, We have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. Neither of them actually claimed to be Son of God. This guy frequently claimed to be Son of the Father, and rightly so, because that is his name, Son of the Father. This guy never claimed to be Son of God or Son of the Father. He called himself Son of Man. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. Where do you come from? He asked Jesus, but Jesus gave no answer. So Pilate and Jesus go back in, and Pilate starts questioning, Where do you come from? Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have the power either to free you or crucify you? And Jesus answered, You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. That is sort of a slippery slope argument right there. Caiaphas and the Jewish people handed Jesus over to Pilate. But of course, if you think about it, Caiaphas would have no authority to have turned Jesus over to Pilate if not for God. So this is kind of interesting because this statement actually points the finger of guilt at the Creator, because the authority is given from above, and that could be a question to ask. This is the way John is describing this. Of course, he wasn't actually in the room when Pilate said this to Jesus. Uh, Jesus, Jesus said everything openly. Here he is speaking behind closed doors. Matthew 24:26 says, "So if anyone tells you, 'There he is out in the wilderness,' do not go out, or 'Here he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it." So this is Jesus accusing God of a greater sin. But in this situation, he is only talking to Pilate. There's only one witness. And of course, if God had not created the universe, then no one would be capable of sin. But does that make the universe the sin, or does that make the universe responsible for the sin, or do human beings have individual accountability? Pilate felt like he had individual accountability. Um, and the but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." So the Jewish leaders uh, maybe would not have to follow through with this um, action. Um, they are accountable for themselves. Um, so the Jewish leaders at that time, including Caiaphas and Annas and others around him, kept shouting, um, "Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar," and they wanted to have Jesus crucified. Although it is not clear whether they uh, were understood what switcheroo was being done right here. And with the switcheroo going on, it may have been Herod that really even did something kind of clever, um, dressing him in that dressing Barabbas in the robe. Because by the time these guys were both dressed in their robes, they could crucify whichever one they wanted, or crucify both of them, for that matter, which I think they ultimately did.